Flight attendant told him this seat isn't for you, so he pulled $600 in airline investment. Marcus Williams was the kind of man who wore success on his sleeve, a quiet confidence that needed no flashy display. But one fateful afternoon, he boarded a routine flight that would change everything. Standing near a row of plush, first-class seats, a flight attendant's cool, dismissive voice shattered his composure. "Sir, this seat isn't for you." Those words, laced with prejudice, ignited a chain reaction no one could have anticipated. Marcus, unbeknownst to the airline, had the power to shift financial tides. Little did they know, the man they tried to dismiss held the keys to a multi-million-dollar deal, and destiny was about to deliver a powerful reckoning. Marcus Williams prided himself on his ability to keep a low profile, despite his towering accomplishments. At 45, he was the product of a turbulent childhood, a brilliant education, and a keen eye for high-stakes investments. He'd started small, barely scraping through college by juggling part-time jobs and scholarship funds at Morehouse College in Atlanta. After graduation, he dabbled in the stock market, pulling inspiration from legendary investors like Warren Buffett. It was during those early years that he learned patience was the greatest virtue in any lucrative endeavor. By the time he reached his late 20s, Marcus was managing a modest portfolio for himself and a few close friends. But soon word spread about his uncanny knack for spotting undervalued assets, and one day a major corporate investor gave him a shot at proving his mettle with a moderate sum. Within a few years, that humble sum multiplied exponentially, skyrocketing Marcus's reputation to near mythic status in certain financial circles. He was discreet, eschewing fancy cars and flashy suits, content to live in a comfortable townhouse near Piedmont Park. You'd never guess he regularly consulted with Fortune 500 CEOs and that he had a direct line to some of the biggest deal makers on Wall Street. Marcus's true power lay not in the money alone, but in his vision. He had a unique ability to see the humanity behind the numbers. He understood how real people were affected by every balance sheet. That deep sense of empathy, combined with a laser-sharp mind for business, made him the kind of investor who didn't just chase profits, he built legacies. It was a late fall day when a longtime partner hinted that Delta Airlines might be in need of new capital for a venture that aimed to modernize their fleet. They were eyeing the next generation of Boeing 737s and 767s, hoping to replace their aging planes with more fuel-efficient, passenger-friendly models. Marcus was intrigued. He respected Delta's history and presence, especially given that the airline was headquartered in Atlanta, practically his backyard. After some due diligence, a scheduled meeting was set. The airline's top executives wanted to court him as a potential major investor. If all went well, Marcus would become a key stakeholder with influence on future expansions and consumer policies. Before the official meeting, though, Marcus planned a surprise observation. He decided to book a flight on Delta Airlines to see how their in-flight experience measured up in real time. He reasoned that actual flight attendants, passenger satisfaction, and staff attitude would give him crucial information numbers on spreadsheets could never convey. And so, with minimal fanfare, he purchased a first-class ticket from Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport to Los Angeles International Airport, an ideal cross-country route for an in-depth look at service standards. Marcus arrived at the airport 2 hours before his flight. He sported a simple navy blazer over a crisp white shirt, with slacks that fit him well but weren't ostentatious. His only indulgence was a pair of high-end noise-cancelling headphones, an essential for a man constantly on the move. People in the terminal bustled about, some bleary-eyed from red eyes, others on business calls, and many traveling for vacation. Marcus slipped into the Delta Sky Club lounge, anticipating a calm environment to review some documents before boarding. No one recognized him, and why would they? He was just another passenger in a sea of travelers, exactly how he liked it. As boarding time approached, Marcus made his way to Gate 17, where a queue had already formed for first class and priority boarding. He scanned the faces of the gate agents. They seemed cordial, verifying tickets and greeting passengers. So far, it was a routine operation. He stepped forward when his zone was called, offering a polite smile as he handed over his boarding pass. The gate agent, a young woman with a bright scarf, waved him through with a practiced courtesy. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Williams," she said, with a pleasant note in her voice. Marcus nodded his thanks and proceeded down the jet bridge, noticing the crisp chill of the air conditioning mixing with the faint smell of fuel. Inside the cabin, the flight was a Boeing 767 with a two-cabin layout, first class and economy. Marcus located his seat, 2A, a spacious leather seat beside a window with a small divider. A kindly older woman was settling into 2C. Marcus offered her a respectful greeting, stored his carry-on overhead, and took his seat. "Hello, dear," the woman said pleasantly. She reminded Marcus of a favorite teacher from childhood. "Afternoon," Marcus responded warmly. He began to situate himself, powering down his phone as directed, giving a quick glance around. A flight attendant walked by, carefully stowing a tray of pre-departure beverages. A second flight attendant was behind her, tall, with her hair in a tight bun, and wearing the signature red Delta uniform. Marcus could tell from her name tag that her name was Lisa. She had the poised posture of a long-time cabin crew member. Her eyes darted around as she mentally checked seat numbers, passenger head counts, and overhead bin space. For a brief moment, her gaze landed on Marcus. Their eyes met, and something flickered across her face. Marcus couldn't pinpoint what it was, maybe surprise or confusion, but she quickly looked away, adjusting the collar of her uniform. He dismissed the moment. Perhaps she was just ensuring everyone was in the correct seat. He settled in and tried to relax, looking forward to reading a new business analysis article on his tablet once the flight reached cruising altitude. Moments later, just as Marcus was about to fasten his seatbelt, Lisa approached him. There was a certain stiffness in her posture. Her tone was neither friendly nor overtly hostile at first. It was, however, undeniably abrupt. "Excuse me, sir," she began, "this seat. Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Marcus was taken aback. He'd already scanned the cabin, confirming his seat's location, and of course, he had the correct boarding pass. Nonetheless, he handed over his pass, still retaining his composure. "Seat 2A, yes. That's what's printed here." Lisa barely looked at the boarding pass. Instead, her eyes hovered on Marcus's face, as though suspecting some sort of trick. "Yes, but this seat is for first-class passengers only," she said, her voice low. Marcus's eyebrows knitted together. "I understand that," he replied. "I purchased a first-class ticket." He expected her to politely apologize for any confusion. That was typically the end of such a mix-up, an occasional slip by flight attendants who might see a new face in first class. But Lisa's expression hardened. She exhaled sharply and pressed her lips together, an air of condescension emanating from her posture. A hush seemed to descend in the immediate vicinity. "You purchased a first-class ticket," Lisa repeated, nearly incredulous. "Would you mind stepping into the aisle for a moment so we can sort this out?" The older woman in seat 2C looked alarmed, but kept her peace for the moment. Marcus, though perplexed, stood, unsure of how best to handle the situation. He followed Lisa a few steps away from the seat, still near the first-class galley. "Sir, it's possible your ticket was upgraded by mistake," she said stiffly. "These seats are for our premium passengers. I'll need to verify your credentials." There was more than mere official procedure in her tone. It carried an unmistakable edge that made Marcus's stomach churn. Marcus's mind briefly flashed with memories of times he'd been profiled, times assumptions had been made about him simply because of his skin color. He swallowed, forcing calm. "Here is my boarding pass again," he said carefully, handing it over. "It should confirm I purchased this ticket. Is there an issue with the system? I'm certain everything is in order." Lisa scanned the pass, and Marcus saw her eyes flit across the seat assignment. Then they moved to the name. She gave a tight-lipped smile that wasn't friendly at all. "We'll see about that," she said, pivoting to talk into the intercom attached to the wall of the galley. In the space of a minute, another flight attendant, this one wearing a darker-colored uniform indicating a supervisory role, joined them. She introduced herself as Diana, the lead flight attendant. Diana glanced from Lisa to Marcus, a shadow of concern passing across her face. "What seems to be the problem, Lisa?" Diana asked, her voice trying to remain professional. Lisa launched into an explanation. "This passenger claims to have purchased a first-class ticket, but something seems off. We're nearly full up front, and I don't see how he could have paid for 2A on such short notice." Marcus handed Diana the boarding pass. She studied it, typed some information into a small device, and frowned. "The system shows Mr. Williams is indeed booked in 2A. He's a Sky Miles Diamond Medallion member as well." Lisa's jaw clenched visibly. There was no contrition in her eyes, only a simmering frustration. "Well," she said through a forced smile, "I suppose that clarifies it." Marcus knew she wasn't about to apologize, and he suspected any apology she offered now would be hollow. Diana turned to him with genuine remorse. "I'm very sorry about the confusion, Mr. Williams. Please have a seat and enjoy the flight. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask." Marcus nodded politely, returning to his seat. He was tempted to let the matter go. He understood that mistakes happen, but the entire exchange left a bitter taste in his mouth. He wondered whether a white passenger in a business suit would have gotten the same interrogation. With the flight preparing for takeoff, passengers settled in, and Marcus tried to put the incident behind him. He even managed a reassuring smile at the woman beside him, who offered a sympathetic look in return. Soon they were airborne, the seatbelt sign off, and flight attendants were busily preparing beverages and meals. Marcus lowered his tray table and tried to relax, opening a financial report on his tablet to distract himself. Time passed quietly for about an hour. Then Lisa reappeared, wheeling the drink cart. She served the older woman politely, offering a warm grin, but when she turned to Marcus, that polite veneer slipped back into something decidedly colder. "Anything for you?" she asked. There was no warmth in her eyes, no standard courtesy. If anything, it felt like she was forced to even speak to him. Marcus responded calmly, "Just a sparkling water, thanks." She poured the water into a plastic cup and held it out. Just as he reached to take it, she let go of the cup. The water spilled down the front of his shirt and blazer, splashing onto his tablet. A shocked gasp rose from the older woman, and Marcus quickly retrieved a napkin to blot at his clothes, while Lisa fumbled for her own stash of paper towels. "Oh my gosh," Lisa exclaimed, her voice lacking genuine remorse. "I'm so sorry. It just slipped." Marcus fought to maintain composure. Accidents could happen, sure, but given the earlier tension, he struggled not to see a pattern. He dabbed at his shirt, feeling everyone's eyes on him. Lisa offered a few token pats with paper towels and then left abruptly, returning to the galley with the cart, leaving him half-soaked in the middle of first class. Diana, noticing the commotion, returned to Marcus's seat to apologize. She handed him fresh towels and offered to cover the cost of dry cleaning. Marcus nodded in acceptance, but his patience was wearing thin. He could sense the older woman in 2C was outraged on his behalf, but she too seemed cautious about intervening openly. Marcus tried to push the incident aside and returned to reading. Another hour passed. Then came dinner time. First class was offered a selection of meals, and Marcus chose the grilled chicken with vegetables. The older woman selected a pasta dish. Lisa and another attendant, Kevin, emerged from the galley with trays. Kevin was calm, friendly, distributing dinner trays with a smile and genuine conversation. When he got to Marcus, he placed the tray carefully on his tray table. "Please let me know if you need anything else, Mr. Williams," Kevin said kindly. Marcus smiled, grateful for at least one amicable presence among the cabin crew. Just as Kevin moved on, Lisa approached from behind. "You might want to be careful with that meal, sir," she said, her voice laced with an unusual caution. "It can be messy, and we wouldn't want you staining the seat." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. The subtle, coded message was unmistakable. She was implying, yet again, that he somehow didn't belong here, that he was being careless or out of place. The remarks stung more deeply than he cared to admit. He lowered his voice. "I'm quite capable of eating dinner without incident," he said, fighting to stay composed. "Thank you for your concern." Lisa turned on her heel and returned to the galley without another word. The older woman in 2C leaned over, her eyes filled with empathy. "I'm sorry you're going through this, dear," she whispered. "I've flown Delta for years, and this is not normal. I hope you'll report her. That's not right, what she's doing." Marcus nodded, inhaling slowly. "I just want to get through this flight," he confessed. "But I appreciate your concern." In the back of his mind, though, he couldn't let it go. He'd paid for a first-class seat money that, as Lisa might never know, barely scratched the surface of his net worth. But beyond the money was the principle. Marcus had fought for success in a world that often didn't expect it from someone who looked like him. He believed in changing perceptions through silent example. And yet, here was a stark reminder that some biases ran so deep they emerged in the very spaces meant for the elite tier of travelers. Halfway through the flight, the cabin lights were dimmed so passengers could rest. Marcus put on his headphones and tried to lose himself in a documentary, but he found it hard to focus. Lisa's repeated microaggressions rattled around in his mind. Finally, he resolved that after landing, he would contact Delta's management and mention the encounter. He figured it would be a note in his observations before his upcoming meeting with their executives. But events took a startling turn. About an hour before they were scheduled to land in LA, Lisa announced over the PA that there would be turbulence and service would be paused. Everyone was asked to remain seated and buckle up. Sure enough, the flight encountered a patch of rough air. The aircraft jostled, and overhead bins rattled. Marcus felt the typical adrenaline rush that comes with turbulence, but he generally remained calm. Then, about 5 minutes later, the plane leveled out, and the seatbelt sign blinked off. Passengers began to stir, some heading for the lavatories. Marcus needed to stretch his legs. He unbuckled and stood in the aisle, waiting to see if there were any sign the seatbelt requirement might come back on. Lisa, who was in the galley, spotted him and immediately marched forward, her face a thundercloud of disapproval. "Sir, you need to sit down," she started. Marcus pointed to the overhead sign, which was off. "It appears the sign is off," he said diplomatically. "I just want to stretch." She snapped. "You're creating a disturbance. The captain wants everyone seated." It wasn't true, or at least the sign indicated otherwise. Before Marcus could respond, Lisa did something truly outrageous. She pressed the intercom and announced that a passenger was refusing to comply with crew instructions. Her voice blared through the cabin, referencing an unruly passenger and how flight attendants might have to intervene. An unsettled murmur spread among the travelers, and heads turned toward Marcus. The older woman in 2C stood up in his defense. "He's not unruly," she exclaimed. "He's just standing. This is ridiculous." Diana, hearing the commotion, rushed over. Marcus felt his heart pounding in anger and disbelief. Lisa was escalating the situation to a dangerous level, painting him as a potential threat. In a post-9/11 world, accusations of being an unruly passenger on an airplane could carry serious consequences. Diana's eyes flashed with alarm. "What's going on here?" she demanded, looking at Lisa, then at Marcus. Lisa cut in before Marcus could speak. "He refuses to sit," she said sharply. "He's ignoring FAA regulations." Marcus clenched his fists at his sides, struggling to remain composed. "The seatbelt sign is off," he said softly. "I am not causing trouble. I was only stretching my legs." Diana's gaze darted to the sign, verifying Marcus's statement. With a glare at Lisa, she ushered Marcus back to his seat, politely urging him to wait just a little longer to move about. Marcus complied, though the injustice of the situation pulsed like a drumbeat in his temple. For the remaining hour of the flight, the atmosphere in the cabin was tense. Lisa avoided Marcus's section entirely. Kevin took over the final beverage service, apologizing again for any inconvenience. Diana hovered near the front, occasionally whispering something to Lisa that Marcus couldn't hear. The older woman in 2C gave Marcus a sympathetic pat on the arm, quietly offering her contact information in case he needed a witness statement later. Finally, the plane touched down at LAX. The captain welcomed everyone to Los Angeles, giving the usual announcements about local time and gates. Marcus let out a long, silent exhale. He was relieved to have the ordeal behind him, but also deeply unsettled by what had transpired. When the seatbelt sign went off, passengers rose to gather their belongings. Some of them cast uncertain looks Marcus's way. Perhaps they were unsure whether he was truly a troublemaker or just a victim of the flight attendant's strange vendetta. As for Lisa, she stood near the forward doors with her arms crossed. Marcus approached, intending to speak calmly, but before he could open his mouth, she turned her face away in a blatant snub. He decided there was no point in a confrontation. Instead, he quietly told Diana that he appreciated her professionalism and apologized if the flight had been stressful. She shook her head. "This shouldn't have happened," she said softly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Williams." Marcus forced a polite smile, took his carry-on, and stepped off the aircraft into the gateway at LAX. One thing was certain, that flight had given him more than enough data for his upcoming meeting with Delta's executives. A few days later, Marcus found himself in a sleek conference room at Delta Airlines corporate offices in Atlanta, ironically not far from the very airport he had departed from. The meeting was scheduled as a preliminary discussion about investing a significant sum, something in the ballpark of $600 million, to support Delta's next phase of fleet upgrades and route expansions. Marcus had come prepared with detailed financial models, a thorough analysis of Delta's route profitability, and new ideas for in-flight innovations that could enhance the passenger experience. However, at the forefront of his mind was the memory of Lisa's blatant discrimination. While he didn't expect the entire airline to be judged solely by one employee's actions, it raised concerns about the company culture. If Delta's frontline staff, those who shaped customer impressions, felt comfortable behaving that way, what did it say about management oversight, diversity training, and accountability? Seated across from him were top executives: Robert Finnegan, Senior VP of Finance, Paula Jenkins, Chief Customer Experience Officer, and Mitchell Thompson, VP of Investor Relations. They greeted Marcus warmly, offering a tray of coffee and pastries. Early pleasantries were exchanged, and the conversation naturally shifted to the scope of the potential investment. "I've reviewed the data," Marcus began, "and I see a lot of opportunity for growth. Specifically, your Pacific routes could be expanded with a new fleet. This is something I'm prepared to discuss backing financially." Robert nodded, a wide smile crossing his features. "We're glad to hear that, Mr. Williams. We believe there's a bright future for partnerships between Delta and forward-thinking investors like yourself." But Marcus noticed Paula Jenkins was studying him intently. "Mr. Williams," Paula asked, "I understand you recently flew with us to LAX. Did you have a chance to evaluate our in-flight services?" Marcus took a breath. This was the moment to speak truth. "Yes, Miss Jenkins. I had a very illuminating experience on that flight. Regrettably, it wasn't entirely positive. I encountered service that was not only subpar, but explicitly discriminatory. A heavy silence descended over the room. Mitchell Thompson cleared his throat. "We'd appreciate if you'd elaborate, sir." Marcus recounted the incident with detail. He explained how the flight attendant, Lisa, had questioned his right to be in first class, spilled a drink on him, and publicly labeled him an unruly passenger. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stated the facts. The executives' faces grew increasingly distressed. Paula was the first to speak. "I am so sorry you experienced that," she said, her tone loaded with sincerity. "We have strict policies about equal treatment and non-discrimination. This is not how we want our employees to behave." "We'll launch an immediate investigation," Robert assured him. "It would help if we had the flight details, date, flight number, seat number, so we can identify this flight attendant and take appropriate action." Marcus slid an envelope across the table containing all the pertinent information and also included contact details for the woman in 2C who had witnessed the entire ordeal. The executives exchanged grim looks. "We value all our customers, but especially our Diamond Medallion members," Paula continued, "and we will make this right. On behalf of Delta, I deeply apologize." A part of Marcus appreciated the quick contrition, but he also wanted to see real change, not just lip service. "I understand that no company is perfect, but this situation highlights something deeper. If this can happen so brazenly, it makes me question how invested you all are in training and accountability. My potential investment isn't just about purchasing new planes, it's about fostering a brand identity that truly welcomes all passengers. If I'm putting hundreds of millions into Delta, I need to know you're committed to a culture that matches your outward messaging." Paula spoke earnestly. "We absolutely are, and we're prepared to show you just how serious we are. Customer experience is my department. We regularly conduct diversity and sensitivity training, but it sounds like we need to reevaluate how effective it's been. I'd be grateful for any input you have on how to strengthen our policies and ensure enforcement." For the next 2 hours, the meeting continued. They discussed the financial structure of the potential deal, hammered out a timeline, and also brainstormed ways to improve training for flight attendants. Marcus floated the idea of making training modules more interactive, possibly including real testimonials from customers who experienced discrimination to drive home the gravity of the matter. The executives seemed receptive, promising to follow up with official proposals. Despite the tension, the meeting ended on a respectful, if sobering, note. Marcus left the corporate tower with a swirl of emotions. Could a multi-billion-dollar company truly change its culture at the behest of one investor, even a major one? He decided to give them time to follow through on their promises, but a seed of doubt remained. He wouldn't finalize anything until he saw tangible steps taken and until he received assurances that Lisa would be appropriately disciplined. Lisa's fate didn't matter to him personally on a vengeful level, but the principle was crucial. If they turned a blind eye to such blatant behavior, how could he trust them with his money? Back in his Atlanta townhouse, Marcus sat at his piano, a place where he often cleared his mind. Music was a comfort he'd discovered as a child, a way to cope with the rigors of life. As he tapped out a melancholic melody, his phone buzzed. It was his younger sister, Vanessa, calling from Houston. "How was the trip, big brother?" she asked, excitement in her voice. She knew about the potential investment with Delta. She had teased him about possibly getting first-class seats for family gatherings in the future. Marcus sighed, launching into the story of the encounter with Lisa. Vanessa was outraged. "You need to call them out publicly," she fumed. "This has to stop. Imagine how many other people have dealt with this kind of treatment and didn't have your resources or platform." Vanessa's words echoed a sentiment that had been nagging at him. It was a painful reality that plenty of black travelers might be treated poorly in first class, questioned or scrutinized when they seemingly didn't fit. Marcus had enough influence to demand accountability. Many did not. But was he ready to go public? That might jeopardize the delicate negotiations. Instead, Marcus told Vanessa, "I'm going to see how Delta handles it. The execs say they'll investigate and discipline her. They promised to revamp training. If they follow through, maybe that sets an example that trickles down." Vanessa exhaled. "I hope you're right. If they don't, I'll be the first to blast them on social media." They shared a small laugh, but the moment was tinged with frustration. Marcus changed the subject to lighter family news. They chatted about a cousin's wedding, a nephew's recent soccer trophy, and parted with warm goodbyes. But once the call ended, the conversation weighed on Marcus's mind. Perhaps a little publicity was exactly what was needed to keep the airline honest. He decided to call up a close friend who worked in public relations for a major firm in Atlanta. Without naming Delta directly at first, he asked how companies usually respond when faced with allegations of racism or discriminatory behavior. The friend said that a big brand like Delta was likely to handle it seriously, at least from a PR standpoint, because they couldn't afford the negative publicity. She advised him to document everything, which Marcus had already done. 2 weeks passed, and during that time, Marcus received multiple calls from Paula Jenkins and Mitchell Thompson. They assured him that the flight attendant in question had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, and they were internally auditing their training methods. They expressed how highly they valued Marcus's perspective and wanted him to remain committed to the investment. Meanwhile, Marcus's lawyers were busy reviewing the legal framework for the deal, ensuring the terms protected him if Delta failed to address the issue. Then came a twist. Paula reached out with a direct invitation. "We'd like to formally invite you to test our improvements. We have a cross-country flight to Seattle that's departing in 2 days, a route we're considering expanding. We'd love for you to fly first class as our guest, no charge, and see if you notice any differences in how staff operates. Think of it as a second chance for us to make things right." Marcus hesitated. The idea of stepping back onto a Delta plane so soon after that fiasco didn't thrill him, but he recognized an opportunity. He could see for himself if the changes were more than lip service. "I'll take you up on that," he said eventually. "But I want to fly incognito. No special notes in the system about me as a VIP or anything like that." Paula agreed, promising that aside from her knowledge, no one on that flight would be told about his status or potential investment. Marcus gave the flight details to his personal assistant, who arranged the journey. As the day neared, he steeled himself for whatever outcome might come his way. On the morning of the flight, he arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson discreetly. No private lounge, no extra frills. He had a straightforward first-class ticket to Seattle. He wore a simple grey suit jacket over black slacks, hoping to blend in with the typical business crowd. He settled into seat 3B, which ironically wasn't far from where he'd sat on the previous ill-fated flight. As he waited, a flight attendant named Carla approached. She had a warm smile that reached her eyes. "Welcome aboard, sir. Can I get you anything before takeoff? Water, orange juice, or perhaps some champagne?" Marcus was slightly guarded, but he mirrored her friendly tone. "A glass of water would be lovely, thank you." Her manner was genuine and devoid of any suspicious glances or probing questions. Marcus tried to let out a breath of relief. For the most part, the rest of the cabin crew was equally polite, addressing him by name only after scanning his boarding pass. No drama ensued. The plane took off and the flight progressed smoothly. Marcus noticed flight attendants being attentive to all passengers, black, white, Asian, Latino, older, younger, and it appeared consistent. He considered that this might be the standard Delta aimed for all along, and Lisa had just been a rotten outlier. Still, one flight alone wouldn't prove the entire corporate culture had improved. But it was a step in the right direction. Upon landing in Seattle, Carla thanked him for flying with Delta. He disembarked without incident. A small sense of hope began to bud in Marcus's chest. Maybe the airline was serious about rectifying the problem. A day after Marcus's flight, Paula Jenkins arranged a video conference with him. She looked relieved. "I trust your flight went more smoothly this time, Mr. Williams. We've received the official findings regarding the previous incident, and we wanted to update you." Marcus was all ears. Paula explained that their internal investigation, combined with statements from passengers and flight staff, concluded that Lisa had acted with prejudice and violated Delta's code of conduct multiple times. "We took into account her entire track record with the airline," Paula said, "and there were previous complaints of rudeness, though none officially citing racial bias. Still, the pattern was clear that she targeted certain passengers unfairly." Paula paused, her face solemn. "We've terminated her employment. Additionally, we're instituting mandatory additional diversity and sensitivity training across all levels of our flight operations staff. I hope this demonstrates we're committed to rectifying such behavior." Marcus felt a wave of conflicting emotions, satisfaction that justice was served, but also a pinch of sadness that someone's career had ended. "I appreciate your transparency," he said. "No one likes seeing someone lose their job, but I also can't condone that kind of behavior." "We understand," Paula responded. "We want to reassure you and all our passengers that Delta does not tolerate discrimination. We hope this addresses your concerns and that you'll proceed with confidence in the investment." "We value your partnership," Marcus nodded. "I'll be in touch with my legal team. If everything aligns with these new measures, we can move forward." In the days that followed Lisa's termination, the corridors of Delta Airlines' corporate headquarters buzzed with an undercurrent of anticipation. Executives whispered about the big deal on the horizon. Everyone knew Marcus Williams was poised to inject an enormous investment into the company, one that could either catapult Delta's long-term growth or spark a wave of internal changes far beyond mere financials. Marcus himself approached the negotiations with cautious optimism. He hadn't come this far scouting the airline's operations, meeting with executives, and enduring a highly publicized ordeal only to settle for a hollow agreement. What he needed was confirmation that Delta was ready to evolve. The question was, could a few powerful signatures on a multi-million-dollar contract truly spark that evolution? Before any ink touched paper, there were weeks of back-and-forth phone calls, video conferences, and private consultations. Marcus's legal team pored over reams of documents related to Delta's financial health, existing contracts, pension obligations, route profitability, and corporate culture initiatives. On Delta's end, Mitchell Thompson, VP of Investor Relations, and Paula Jenkins, Chief Customer Experience Officer, took the lead, ensuring each line in the contract addressed Marcus's expectations as well as Delta's bottom line. Robert Finnegan, Senior VP of Finance, was responsible for hammering out the numbers in a way that satisfied the board of directors, who had to sign off on every detail. Throughout these discussions, Marcus made one thing abundantly clear. This wasn't just about money. Yes, $600 million would enter Delta's coffers funds, earmarked to modernize the fleet, expand routes, and improve operational efficiency. But Marcus wanted assurances that his influence would extend to shaping Delta's brand identity and passenger experience, a prerogative that most investors seldom request. He insisted on a formal seat on a newly established advisory board that would oversee two critical areas: passenger experience and corporate social responsibility. For Delta, creating such a role was an unconventional move. Typically, large sums of capital from major investors might secure a position on the board of directors or an observer role in strategic discussions, but rarely did it reach into the day-to-day realm of employee training and passenger engagement. Nonetheless, the airline realized that accommodating Marcus was not only a gesture of goodwill, it also signaled to the public that Delta was serious about stamping out discrimination and modernizing its approach to customer care. Still, not everyone at Delta was thrilled. Whispers circulated among mid-level managers who resented the idea of an outsider telling them how to handle their workforce. A small faction on the board believed the company had already done enough by terminating Lisa and instituting incremental training revisions. Why invite further oversight? But Paula Jenkins stood firm, reminding her colleagues that the incident with Lisa was symptomatic of a deeper issue. "Marcus represents more than capital," she said passionately in a closed-door meeting. "He's a symbol of accountability that we need if we're to maintain our credibility in the global market." As the contract neared completion, tensions ran high. Delta's top brass worried about the possibility that Marcus might walk away if the terms weren't precisely to his liking, an outcome that would risk both losing a massive investment and fueling negative press. For his part, Marcus remained calm yet unyielding. He engaged in thorough conversations with his personal advisors, weighing the benefits of forging a partnership against the risk of Delta reverting to old habits once the initial flurry of publicity died down. Eventually, a compromise emerged. The $600 million would be delivered in structured tranches over a set period. This approach ensured that Delta kept making progress on the new diversity and training initiatives. If they failed to meet agreed-upon benchmarks, certain portions of the funding could be withheld. Moreover, a formal advisory board, jointly chaired by Paula Jenkins and Marcus, would meet quarterly to review policies, provide oversight on passenger experience issues, and discuss any reported instances of bias or discrimination. This board would also monitor broader social responsibility efforts, such as carbon footprint reduction and charitable outreach to underrepresented communities. When both sides finally reached an agreement, the signing date was set for a sunny Friday morning at Delta's headquarters in Atlanta. Marcus arrived wearing a tailored charcoal suit, his expression composed yet reflective of the gravity of the moment. Security guards, corporate staff, and media personnel lined the building's lobby. Paula, Robert, and Mitchell personally escorted Marcus and his legal team to a large conference room where fresh coffee, pastries, and an impressive view of the Atlanta skyline greeted them. The contract itself was a thick sheaf of documents, bristling with legal jargon references to stock warrants, board member privileges, and performance metrics. Marcus methodically flipped through the pages, pen in hand, while his attorneys nodded their approval. Once the final signature was penned, an electric hush fell over the room. This deal wasn't just an injection of capital, it was a covenant to ensure Delta's brand would operate by the principles of respect, equity, and customer satisfaction. "Welcome to Delta's future, Mr. Williams," Robert Finnegan said, a note of pride in his voice as he extended his hand. Marcus shook it, reciprocating the sentiment with a polite, measured smile. Yet the momentous occasion was far from over. Paula Jenkins had arranged a press conference scheduled for that afternoon. The media had already caught wind that Delta was announcing a major partnership with an influential investor, but the details had been kept tightly under wraps. By 2 o'clock, journalists, camera crews, and industry insiders packed a modest auditorium adjacent to the conference area, clamoring for a glimpse of the new alliance. Marcus, who generally avoided public spectacle, had steeled himself for the bright lights and prying questions. He knew this press conference was a crucial step in establishing Delta's stance on tolerance, equality, and progress, particularly after the fiasco with Lisa. It was also an opportunity for him to explain, without diving into unnecessary drama, why he'd chosen to invest so heavily in an airline marred by a recent scandal. A hush fell as Paula Jenkins took the podium first. She briefly recounted Delta's proud history, mentioning the airline's deep roots in Atlanta and its commitment to customer service. Then she segued into the new partnership. Today, Paula announced, her voice resonating through the microphones, we embark on a journey that marries financial growth with ethical responsibility. It is my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Marcus Williams, an investor, a thought leader, and a man whose vision for what travel can be has already begun to shape our future. Marcus stepped forward amid the staccato bursts of camera shutters. The crowd leaned in, sensing a story bigger than mere numbers. Calmly, he introduced himself and elaborated on his investment philosophy, which revolved around companies that aimed not just for profit, but also for measurable social impact. He refrained from detailing the Lisa incident publicly, choosing instead to say that his partnership with Delta began with a moment of concern, one that the airline responded to swiftly and decisively. He praised Delta's willingness to address issues of bias within its ranks, noting that a company's true character is revealed by how it confronts uncomfortable truths. As we move forward together, Marcus concluded, it is my sincere hope that Delta becomes a global model for equitable treatment, exemplary service, and genuine care for every passenger who steps onto their planes. This partnership isn't just about finances. It's about a shared vision of what air travel can look like when we do right by each other. The audience erupted in applause. Several reporters immediately jotted down notes, eager to capture every word for a headline or a soundbite. The synergy between Marcus's calm gravitas and Delta's newly reinforced moral stance felt palpable in the room. As the event wound down and journalists filed out, Paula Jenkins approached Marcus, her eyes shining with relief and gratitude. That was wonderful, she said, barely containing her excitement. Thank you for your candor and for framing everything in a way that emphasizes the future rather than dredging up the past. Marcus exhaled, feeling the weight of the cameras finally lift off his shoulders. I'm cautiously optimistic, he admitted. You've taken steps that few companies are willing to take. But we both know the real test is in the follow-through. I'll be holding you to the commitments we made today. Paula smiled, and there was no mistaking the resolve in her expression. I expect nothing less, she said softly, acknowledging the gravity of the promise they had just made to the world. At that moment, neither Marcus nor Paula could fully fathom how deeply this partnership would shape Delta's future and possibly the wider aviation industry. But for the moment, they stood together under the glare of stage lights, representing two halves of a newfound alliance, a storied airline seeking redemption and expansion, and a visionary investor determined to ensure that those in power would wield it justly. 2 months later, Marcus's influence on Delta was already noticeable in subtle ways. Revised training manuals, new role-play scenarios for flight attendants, dealing with diverse passenger situations, and thorough instructions on how to handle seating inquiries without prejudice. And while Delta didn't publicize Lisa's termination widely, word spread among employees that the company had dismissed a senior flight attendant over discriminatory behavior. Morale among staff who valued fairness went up, while those harboring biases grew wary of crossing the line. But the story of Lisa's downfall didn't end with her firing. She attempted to file a wrongful termination lawsuit against Delta, claiming she was targeted unfairly and that Marcus, an influential man with deep pockets, orchestrated her firing. The court, however, demanded evidence. Delta's legal team, armed with passenger testimonies, Lisa's track record, and the airline's code of conduct policies, easily demonstrated that Lisa's repeated violations were the reason for her dismissal. The judge not only ruled in Delta's favor, but also noted the egregious nature of Lisa's behavior, chastising her for attempting to exploit the legal system. In a final twist of fate, Lisa was saddled with legal fees she could ill afford. Her credibility in the aviation industry was tarnished. No reputable airline would hire someone with such a public record of discriminatory allegations. She found herself working at a small regional charter service, far removed from the first-class cabins she once presided over. Meanwhile, Marcus's life proceeded with quiet satisfaction. He hadn't sought retribution for retribution's sake, rather. He'd insisted on accountability that was swiftly and efficiently delivered. Through that process, Lisa reaped the consequences of her own actions. In the weeks immediately following Lisa's termination, Marcus found himself reflecting often on the twists of fate that had led him there. What began as a spontaneous flight to assess Delta's service ended in a defining moment, one that reshaped not only the airline's culture but also his own perspective on wielding influence. With the ink barely dry on the investment contracts, he felt both pride and a hint of responsibility. By stepping into a leadership role on Delta's newly formed advisory board, he'd inherited the trust of countless passengers who, like him, believed in a fair and equitable flying experience. Yet life did not slow down. While juggling new advisory meetings with Delta, Marcus continued to oversee a multitude of other investments. His phone buzzed daily with proposals from startups, philanthropic organizations, and occasionally strangers who'd heard the rumor of how he transformed a bitter encounter into a sweeping corporate change. Indeed, rumor often edged close to myth. Some told the story of how the mysterious passenger in first class brought a global airline to its knees, demanding contrition. Though the hype was exaggerated, Delta had hardly been brought to its knees. Marcus recognized that the story carried symbolic weight. In his private moments, he processed what that weight meant. He remembered his days at Morehouse College, scraping together scholarship money and part-time income to stay afloat. He thought of the mentors who encouraged him not only to succeed, but to do so without abandoning compassion. Now he saw a chance to pay that mentorship forward. True to his word, he expanded his philanthropic endeavors, establishing a foundation that offered scholarships for Black youth interested in pursuing careers in aviation or hospitality management. The rationale was simple. The best way to ensure real change in the industry was to bring more diverse voices into the cockpit, the control tower, and the executive suite. Through the Marcus Williams Foundation, he partnered with historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, offering internships that gave students a first-hand look at both sides of the aviation world, the day-to-day grind of airline operations, and the high-level strategies that shaped passenger experience. More than one Delta executive stepped up to help coordinate behind-the-scenes tours, seminars, and mentorship opportunities. Indeed, Paula Jenkins herself volunteered to speak at foundation events, sharing her own vision for a discrimination-free travel experience. Marcus's influence on Delta's advisory board also grew. In closed-door sessions, he wasn't shy about stressing the importance of transparency. He encouraged the company to compile regular reports on how many bias-related incidents were being reported, how they were resolved, and how quickly. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, he would say, echoing a proverb he'd embraced in business. If staff members realized that each complaint would be carefully tracked, measured, and addressed, they might think twice before dismissing or ignoring it. Simultaneously, Marcus made it a point to fly Delta often unannounced, in different classes to see how improvements were faring at ground level. He'd board a plane to New York in main cabin economy or jet to Dallas in Comfort Plus. Occasionally, he'd slip into first class for longer routes. Each journey was a chance to observe the changing airline culture. He took mental notes on how staff greeted passengers, how they handled disputes, and whether any faint echo of Lisa's treatment lingered. More often than not, he was pleasantly surprised. Flight attendants engaged warmly, addressed him politely, and extended the same courtesy to travelers of all backgrounds. When he sensed tension in the cabin, an argument over overhead bins, or a toddler crying inconsolably, Marcus paid close attention. He wanted to see if the staff approached these difficulties with patience or if frustration took hold. Such details mattered. Small moments, after all, were the seeds of bigger change. Word of Lisa's dismissal still circulated in hushed tones among Delta employees. Some sympathized with her, believing she must have been under intense personal stress. But most who heard the full story found themselves staunchly on the side of accountability. No one wanted to encourage a culture that tolerated prejudice. Lisa's lawsuit had backfired, leaving her with limited career options and a sullied reputation in the aviation community. Where once she'd enjoyed the prestige of a senior flight attendant role, she now scrambled for freelance gigs and local charter flights that offered neither the pay nor the respect she'd grown accustomed to. For Marcus, there was no personal vendetta, only the firm belief that people should face consequences when they so clearly violate someone else's dignity. He quietly hoped Lisa would learn from her downfall. If she ever sought redemption and a change of heart, maybe one day she'd find a way to contribute positively in some corner of the travel industry. But that, he knew, was out of his hands. As for Delta, the airline made good on its promise to reshape internal culture. Besides updating training manuals, they included more real-life scenarios in new hire orientations. Some modules specifically covered unconscious bias, role-playing exercises on handling delicate passenger interactions, and group discussions about how to recognize and address discrimination. Marcus even recorded a video statement, made available to staff, explaining why an inclusive approach to service was vital not just for the airline's bottom line, but for every person who stepped onto a Delta plane. Looking back, Marcus still felt a tremor of indignation whenever he recalled Lisa's words, "This seat isn't for you." But that memory also served as a potent reminder of how quickly fortunes could change when unchecked biases met unyielding resolve. The seat itself became a metaphor for the business deals he influenced, the philanthropic goals he pursued, and the principle that everyone deserves a rightful place at the table. It was never truly about forcing out one malicious flight attendant. It was about ensuring that anyone, of any race or background, could occupy those seats with the confidence that they indeed belonged. And so, in the comfortable quiet of his study or the bustling corridors of airport terminals, Marcus carried the lesson forward. He remained a champion of equity, never abandoning the humility that had guided him from his Morehouse days to the apex of high-stakes investment. Though life would undoubtedly present more challenges, he took solace in knowing that, at least on Delta flights, a passenger's worth would no longer hinge on preconceived notions of who deserved to fly among the clouds. Thank you for following this gripping journey of resilience and redemption. Marcus's story reminds us that sometimes even the simplest moments a seat on an airplane can be powerful turning points that spark meaningful change. It shows how empathy, accountability, and quiet determination can transform unjust situations into catalysts for reform, proving that hard work and strong principles can overcome ignorance and prejudice. If you found inspiration in Marcus's story and want to see more real-life tales of triumph over discrimination and adversity, please do 3 simple things. Like this video, share it with your friends or family who might be inspired, and subscribe to our channel for more impactful stories. Your support keeps these messages of empowerment and progress alive. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay strong, and remember that every seat belongs to those who claim it with dignity and purpose.